Welcome to this episode of Ask Smart PLM Questions. In one of my previous videos, I showed you how to use, Aras dialogs, but also non-standard dialogs, like you can see here in this video, or I still have some kind of sample code here. So I showed you how to display these kind of dialogs with a JavaScript method. And I got one smart question in the comments of my video about how to manage dialogs from server event responses. And I will try to answer this question in this video. So in my previous video, I used this kind of code to show notification messages. And of course, this is all JavaScript client-side methods. Things are a little bit different when we are in a server-side method. Here, for example, I have prepared a very simple server method that does a get query for a user item, for example, for the admin item. So this is the most basic setup you can have for a server method. So we have our innovator itself, we get the item, set some property. Okay, we now want to get an item with the login main admin. Important, always use the select attribute to keep the response short, and this will improve a little bit of query speed. And then we apply some methods, and then we should get our user item. So this is the most basic setup. When I now run this server method, you can see it returns me the admin user with ID, key name, very simple. For testing, I can also just release the select, so the attribute select, and you can see the response will be much longer, because right now he returns me the complete admin user item. So this would be no problem in my case now, because I just query for one item. But imagine when you're not just looking for one item, but for 10,000 items, then you can improve speed very much just by using the select statement. In server methods, of course, we always have to return something. Here in this case, I simply return the items that I got after the query was executed. And server methods always have to return items, or they have to return null. So I can return this get item, but I also can return null. This is also a scenario we have. Just let's test out this one too. Run the server method. And I assume, yes, we get no result, we get null, we get nothing. Of course, we return null. So we have this one, get item is a normal situation, or I even could make things a little bit shorter by returning get item supply, get item apply. This should also work. Let's test it out. Yep, same result. So this one saves us one line of code, but I actually would recommend you to use this one, because of course every time now here what we have done, we always executed a query where we already knew before that it will work, because of course we have an admin user. But what will happen if we look for an admin 2 user, which does not exist? Then it returns me nothing. Not even an error. Even we know that now an error occurs. So I have to add something additional here to get my error. Let's say if get item is error, then tell me that an error happened. Return in new error. And let's say an error occurred, and also give me some details. Get error details, so I know what went wrong. Let's see what happens now. Did I write everything correct? Yes. And now I get this error dialog. So an error occurred, and he also tells me what went wrong. So he weren't able to find a user with the username admin2. So you can see, okay, here we now have a real actual dialog response from our server message. It's this error message. So now the question, can we also tell our users that something positive happened? So not just an error, but also, hey, your query succeeded. Let them know that it succeeded. Well, one option that you have is to return a new result, a result item. And in this result item, of course, we cannot just return this get item, which is an item itself. Here we can just return some kind of string information that we want to hand over. Let's see what will happen when we return a result. An error occurs because I made something. Oh, of course, I still enforce the error with my admin2 that doesn't exist. So in this case, result just brings me a result XML result string, but this is nothing that the actual user can see. Keep in mind, I always work with this run server method test thing. So this is not how end users will work with this methods. It's just what I do right now to have the most easiest way to trigger this method. So, but you can see no pop-up message appears like with this Innovator new arrow dialogs that we have seen before. So what kind of return types do we have? We have seen null. We have seen that we can return the complete item, or we can use this new error and new results to create to return some kind of item carriers that contains individual information like the ID or the arrow. Typically, most of the time you return the complete item, because when you want to know about a specific property of this item, you can always filter it later. This variant you use when you really know, hey, I just want to return this ID. Now the question is, okay, when we just can throw error dialogs from our server methods, how can we now inform our users that something went correct, or how can we connect it with this success and warning messages we have seen in the last video? Well, we of course always have the option to call a server method from a client method. So we have seen this sample here that is triggered from this button event. Let's see if I have prepared something again. And yes, I have. Look at this. So let's remove this one. We don't need it anymore. Okay, what do I do here? The most important part of this function is this Aras apply method, because with this one I can call a server method. So here Aras apply calls a server method and pass this body that contains the properties that I want to hand over to this C# method. So here you can see I want to search for the login name root. I pass this information within this XML tags and the body, and then hand it over to the server method. Of course, here in this server message, I also need to read this passed parameter. I haven't done it yet here, so here I still have this fixed target admin. Let's change it to string target. It's this get property, because the context item will be passed. And it was, how is my temporary property called? It's this one. And let's define an alternative value, and when something is wrong, this value helps me that I can still use this method with run server method, because I add this property to the context item. So normally login name, it's just a temporary property that is parsed from this method to this method. But here, of course, what is this in this context? Here in this context, this is the actual method. It's not my cat item, because I call it straight down from here with run server method. And as this is my method and I don't have this login name property, I just say, okay, when you don't have a login name property, just use admin. So, and here, so I call this one, and you can see already have built something to react with the returned value. In the case of calling a C# method from a JavaScript method, when the C# method fails, we will actually get this new error dialog here, so we don't have to throw our own alert. Like, for example, of course we can now do like an alert, Aras alert error, something failed, but you know, then we will get two error messages, so one thrown from the server method, but also the one thrown here from the JavaScript dialog. But let's see what happens. And of course, let's enforce an error because I now want to see the error situation. Let's create a new cat item. Click my button. Something failed. First error message thrown by server method. Second error message thrown by, no, this was the one from the server method. Wait a second. Here the JavaScript says something fail and the server method has an error occurred and a little bit more stuff. Let's try again. Okay, this was JavaScript and C#. So we don't need an additional JavaScript error here. We just can say return. And of course we can also do something with the result. For example, if we don't have, so if our method fails, we just return it to nothing, because we get our error message from the server method. But of course, when our method succeeded, we can of course always do an Aras alert success worked, and we can do something with the result, I assume, or just let's see what the result looks at all. Create a new cat. Oh, still fails because I again did the same mistake. I look for something that doesn't exist, save this one, that's this one. Okay, worked, result. And you now can see our result is within this result tag. So I don't want to have this complete result, whatever. I just want to have, for example, the ID itself, and not all these tags. These tags and XML stuff is not very helpful for the user, it's just confusing. So how do we get our result from this result XML string? Well, I have prepared something. Of course. So, new arrows, this is, and I'm in the wrong method. And we already have done this kind of stuff. I have to go to my JavaScript method, where I'm pretty sure also have prepared something, of course. So how do we get our result? Well, easy, we create a new empty item, then load in the AML result to this empty item, and then we can work with this item. Pretty easy and straightforward. I have found it in the forum. So, because, yeah. So let's see if what our alert success will now return when we use this one. Let's create a new cat document. And then something, not a single item. What was wrong with my query? You shouldn't have. Result is fine. Aras result. I found the bug, because in this case here I still return a result, but in my sample I don't want to work with the result, I want to work with get item. This sample returning results and working with the result is a little bit different. So in my case, this is don't want to cover another case. Aras alert success, and now it should work. And here you can see now we have our C# result that we use in our JavaScript method. And again, we can of course enforce an error by changing this one. And then we should also get an error message, like we have here, all right? And this way, when you call a C# method from a JavaScript method, you have the full flexibility of JavaScript notification messages that you can use for your server method. So now, of course, you will came up with the question, oh, but you also had shown this sample with this new result, and of course we can also call JavaScript from JavaScript, or we can call C# from C#, and there are so many variants possible where we have returned something and want to react to this kind of stuff, because who should know this kind of stuff with this create a new empty item, and you can Google for hours to find all samples that might be possible, but haha, there is a solution, of course. I'm pretty sure you all follow very closely my PLM Underground blog, and I have one older article about method calls in Innovator, where you can find a comprehensive and pretty cool overview of all possible method calls. For example, C# to result, C# to C# return an item or return a result and work with it. Same for C# JavaScript to C# return an item, return a result. And you can see actually in my video I used one of these samples. I think it's this one. So you can test them out by yourself. It's always two methods. One, for example, JavaScript, and this one calls this C# method. You can always enforce an error by changing this, for example, username. And we of course have also a JavaScript to JavaScript method sample, but without promise. And here where things get interesting, because most of the time when this use case is easy. So we have one JavaScript method that calls one C# method. But in reality, you will often have this situation that you have one JavaScript method that calls a JavaScript method, a C# method, and then a JavaScript method again. And then you will need to use asynchronous methods and promises. And yeah, you have to do method calls a little bit different. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, let me know down in the comments, and maybe I will be happy enough to make a video about JavaScript with promises, because then this when you're able to do this kind of stuff, you can really do pretty cool methods and functions. But for the start, look at this blog article. I think it will cover most of the use cases you will have in daily work. So please, like this video when you like this content, and then see you next time. Bye.